Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. We just discussed the Canon G1X Mark III. Brand new announcement, new offering coming out from Canon. Interesting beast, very interesting beast, as I mentioned in the previous video, because of the fact that this is a APS-C sensor. This is a full 1.5 crop APS-C sensor. In other words, it's the same sensor we've got in the 77D or the M5. Very capable 24 megapixel sensor at a very large size for a fixed lens camera. Now, I discussed 14 interesting points, 14 reasons you might want to consider buying the G1X Mark III in the last video. However, there are some significant points or counterpoints to be made for why you might not want this camera. And first and foremost would be the lens, 24-72 millimeter, and it is a f2.8 to 5.6. Just want to make sure I had that spec exactly right for you. And while 2.8 doesn't sound bad on the face of it, a lot of other cameras, like if we look at the getting quite old now, Panasonic LX100, which I loved that camera, much faster lens on it on the wide end and much faster at the long end. Here we've got, a 2.8 on wide is okay, but it could be made to be faster. 5.6 at the long end on a 24-72 is quite slow. And for a camera in this price point, $1299, I think this is not great value for the price. For $1,300, you could quite easily get yourself a DSLR and a decent lens and a fast 50 f1.8 to go with it. You could even get various lenses that are 2.8 constant aperture lenses and be in a better position than what you have here with this G1X Mark III. So the first point that is my counterpoint why you might not want this, and you got to look at some of its failings, would be that this is a relatively slow lens, and especially for being such a slow lens, actually a relatively short range zoom. Because for a lens of this slow aperture, variable aperture lens that's not very fast, you could have maybe forgiven them for giving you a longer lens, in the sense of maybe it could have been a 24-120 with a 2.8 to 5.6. But it's only a 24-72, and it's 5.6 at the long end and only 2.8 at the wide end. So I think they've kind of cheaped out here on the lens, and they haven't cheaped out on the price. So that would be my second point, is the price. Since we're already talking about the value in the lens and what you're getting for the price, let's bring that as the second point, is the price. At $1299, this is quite an expensive camera, and you're getting the fixed lens that's not a fast lens at that price, and then the other options are there's some other points here that aren't great for that price. Actually, you know what? Let's leave the price. Let's continue to talk about the price at the end. Let's talk about the other failings or other weak points of this camera, and then we'll lump it all into what you're getting for the price. The buffer can only hold 19 RAW or 24 JPEGs. So for a fairly fast shooting camera, 9 frames a second with AEAF lock or 7 frames a second with continuous autofocus, we got a buffer that fills up pretty quick. It's not comparable to most DSLRs as far as what the buffer can hold here. And for a camera at the price point we're talking about, I think that's a pretty weak offering for the buffer. I think Canon could have given us a better buffer, especially, again, with them pricing the camera where they've priced this. The third point, which is a bit of a failing, or could be a significant failing for some people, is a 200-shot rated battery. So we're getting a very weak battery, very minimal battery life for a camera that is an APS-C camera that is, going to be something that somebody's considering as something, whether or not they're going to buy a DSLR or whether they're going to buy this. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at that. So the DSLR is going to win hands down here in almost every single case. I'm not aware of any DSLRs that can only shoot 200 shots on a battery. That's definitely a weak point for this camera, is its battery life. Fourth, we have the video. And I'm sure some of you are wondering, I really haven't picked on this yet, but you knew it was coming. There's no 4K video in this thing. And why? I mean, we're talking about a fixed lens APS-C camera. There was no reason Canon needed to feel threatened that this camera was going to threaten DSLR sales or their full-frame DSLR sales or their video camera sales. They could have given us quite nicely. This would have been a very nice peace offering from Canon to allow us to have 4K in a capable camera from Canon. But instead, they've chosen not to. They've chosen to only give us 1080 60p which in this day and age is dated. It's long in the tooth, quite frankly. And I know there's those of you that are interested in video, but many of us are now. And for many of us, video is more important than photography, or at least equal to. And a lot of pros now are shooting more and more video, and that's where a lot of their market is. And if you wanted to sell this camera as a companion to a pro's array of cameras in their bag, then this is a big letdown for them. And I think this is a big failing on Canon's part, as it seems to continue to be the trend from Canon to not allow us to have 4K in anything except higher-end full-frame cameras and their video cameras. And I think Canon's going to really pay for these choices as consumers speak with their wallets. And so to me, this is a huge issue. And I think this was a camera that I was really hoping Canon would have given us 4K on. And they haven't. So they dropped the ball here. And then the last point, again, we're back to price, as I started to talk about earlier, but I wanted to tie in all these weak points. So with all these weak points, the price becomes significant, because $12.99, this is not an inexpensive camera. For $12.99, you could get yourself an 80D or a 77D. You could get yourself a very capable set of lenses probably with it for around that price. I mean, the 50mm f1.8 STM from Canon, one of my favorites, is only a $125 lens. You can get it as a Canon refurb for about $90. You can get the 18-135 STM with the 77D or the 80D for, around $1,000 or less as a refurb. So you're talking about a camera that's priced above what any of these capable Canon competitors are. The 77D, the 80D, you could even get a 70D. And you could get quite an array of lenses that would be much more versatile, include a 50, which is much faster, and you could get the 55-250 and give you the longer range. And so we have to look at that, because at $12.99, this camera, people are going to be considering whether they want to add it to their bag or whether they want to buy it as a option against a DSLR or instead of against a DSLR. And frankly, I'd have a hard time with these limitations with this slow variable aperture lens, this lens that is a quite a limited range for such a slow lens, 24-72. It's not a fast lens, and it has a limited range for considering its aperture. Then we've got minimum battery life, very, very weak battery life, 200 shots. We've got the weak video performance. It doesn't have 4K. And then we've got a buffer on top of that when you're shooting photos, it fills up pretty quick. So it's very hard to take advantage of its good spec, its fast shooting speed at 9 frames a second or 7 frames a second with continuous AF. So when you consider all those points and you lump them together and then look at the price, it's a premium price. Never mind the limitations. If they had brought this camera out at that price and it had a much faster lens and it had 4K video and it had a better buffer and it had better battery life, we would be looking at still a premium priced camera. It would be better spec'd for sure, and we might be more inclined to consider this. But with all these weaknesses, with all these inherent failings of the camera, these limited specs, these things that for the price should definitely have been better, it really makes you question, should you spend $12.99 on this camera? And I have a hunch that this is not going to be a good seller for Canon, and I hope they just don't say, oh, well, that's because people aren't interested in fixed lens cameras or this premium fixed lens compact, because people are, if you spec them right. Other companies have shown us this. Sony has, Panasonic has, but this camera is weak in too many spots for this price point. It even at a lower price point, it needs some of these things addressed, like the 4K video. So that's what my feelings are on the weaknesses of this camera. And then, the fifth point being the price. So the value is not good. The value for your money here is not good. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me on these points? Is one more significant to you than others? Do you disagree? What do you think about these 4 points, 5? The price included, because the price is the value of the camera, that I'm pointing out as some pretty significant, I think, failings of the camera, especially at that price. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think. If you agree, you disagree, and why. Let's discuss it, and interested to hear your feedback. And let me know if I'm off base. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com.